Greetings, mortals. It is I, Remortis, and today I'm bringing you another Baldur's Gate 3 guide. This time on the popular and powerful multiclass, the Sorcadin, or the Sorcerer Paladin, bringing you faith, steel, and firepower. And thanks to Baldur's Gate 3, I can finally play this powerful combo without being judged for power gaming. And I'll be able to play D&D without needing friends. I'm so lonely. Excuse me. Combining the Paladin's durability, divine strength, and reliability with the Sorcerer's volatile potent magics and their powerful bloodlines creates a versatile character, being able to fight on the front lines, dealing devastating damage in the form of slinging spells or melee attacks. It's one of the stronger martial spellcaster hybrids. The Sorcadin is a very nuanced build, meaning that there are tons of subtle details and changes that can make this build complex and interesting. Differing levels in either class, or throwing Warlock into the mix, which would make a Lockadin or Sorlockadin, both of which are really great options as well, but we'll get into those in another video. For now, we'll just be focusing on the Sorcadin. We'll be going over the basics of each class and what they bring to the table for this build, going over each subclass and flavor options available, and there will be a leveling guide as well. But fear not, there will be timestamps below so you can skip ahead to what section is relevant to you. And without further ado, let's get straight into it, shall we? The Paladin, a beacon of hope, truth, and justice. Clad in heavy armor and divine power, always ready for a fight, and when there's evil afoot, it is ready to smite!
Smite the enemy!
At level 1, the Paladin provides us with 1d10 plus Constitution modifier HP at level 1, and then a plus 6 Con modifier from there on. So, if we had a Constitution of 14, we'll start level 1 with 12 HP and gain 8 hit points from each level afterwards. For proficiencies, we can wear all armor, shields, and use any type of weapons, outside of class or race restriction, of course. And we gain saving throws and wisdom and charisma, both of which are solid to have, which allows us to resist crowd controls and other nasty spells. We'll also get access to Lay of Hands, which functions a little bit different in Baldur's Gate 3, where we're given Lay of Hands charges, which you can spend 2 charges for a larger heal, or 1 charge for a half heal, or 1 charge to cleanse poison and disease. Each charge is worth 2 times your level, so at level 4, for example, you'd be able to spend 2 charges to heal for 16 hit points, or 1 charge for 8. Pretty neat. We'll also get Divine Sense, which will allow us to gain advantage on attack rolls against Celestials, Fiends, and Undead as a bonus action that lasts for 2 turns. At level 2, we gain quite a few things. A fighting style between Defense, which gives us plus 1 AC while wearing armor, Dueling, which will allow us to do more damage while using a one-handed weapon in our main hand and no weapons in our offhand, but we can still use a shield. Great Weapon Fighting, which lets us reroll any 1s on our damage, which is pretty sweet, especially if you're using a Greatsword, which rolls 2 damage die, so if you roll a 1 on both of those dice, you can reroll that. And Protection, which can impose disadvantage on an enemy trying to attack a nearby ally. Generally for this build, you'll be choosing between Dueling to use a one-handed weapon and shield, or Great Weapon Fighting to fight with Greatsword or polearm weapon. All these tactics are completely viable, but I think I probably prefer to use a sword and shield for increased protection. We also get access to level 1 spells, as you can see here. We'll go over these later as we get into the build. And the most iconic skill for the Paladins, Divine Smite, which lets you sacrifice those pesky spell slots to deal some pretty solid damage on your melee attacks. And this skill is why Paladins are known as the Boss Slayer, as you can do incredible amounts of burst damage on your melee attacks. At level 3, we will choose our Oath. But wait, that's not quite true. Larian Studios tweaked the Paladin so that you actually pick your Oath at level 1, which makes sense for thematic reasons, since you'll be acting on that oath from character creation. And each subclass of Paladin has strict oaths that they must follow, or else they'll lose those powers associated with it. And I'm not kidding. But we'll go over each of those subclasses and oaths in a moment. For now, let's move on to the rest of the Paladin levels. At level 4, we can choose between an ability score increase or a feat. At level 5, we get an extra attack and access to level 2 Paladin spells. At level 6, we gain Aura Protection, which will grant yourself and nearby allies a bonus to all saving throws equal to your Charisma modifier. And this is why everyone loves having a Paladin in their team. And at level 7, each Paladin subclass gets another aura specific to their oath. And speaking of the oaths, at launch, we will have 3 oaths to pick from, or 4 if you're a naughty boy or girl. Oath of the Ancients, Devotion, and Vengeance. As mentioned before, each oath has pretty strict tenets that they must abide by, and this will actually reflect on your choices within Baldur's Gate 3 as well. If you break your tenet, you will break your oath and become an Oathbreaker. So keep this in mind when playing a Paladin of any kind. Not just for today's build. The Oath of the Ancients, also called Fey Knights, are protectors of life and nature. They are merciful and kind, in hopes that they can rekindle the light in this dark world. Or in other words, they're druids who just wanted to be knights. So as long as you try to be nice, preserve nature, and oppose wickedness, you'll be fine playing as one of these. As mentioned before, Larian made some changes to the subclasses, and now each Paladin Oath starts with a level 1 Channel Divinity ability, which are now called Channel Oaths. For Oath of the Ancients, this spell is called Healing Radiance, which is a 2-turn AoE heal that pulses on the turn it is cast, and will heal again at the beginning of your next turn. It heals for your Charisma modifier times your Paladin level for each pulse, which is pretty incredible for a level 1 feature. It's also really good at keeping your parties alive on 2 turns, especially in really dangerous encounters. At level 3, we gain 2 different ways to channel our oath, with Nature's Wrath being able to restrain an enemy, and Turn the Faithless, which is similar to Turn Undead from Clerics, but it affects Fiends and Fae. At level 7, each oath gets another aura in addition to protection from level 6, as mentioned before, and the Oath of the Ancients gets Aura of Warding, which provides you and your allies resistance to any damage from spells, which is a pretty sweet option to consider. The Oath of the Ancients has a pretty nice spell list, too, because as you pick each of these oaths, you get some free bonus spells in your spellbook. You always have them prepared, but they still require spell slots. At level 3, as an Oath of the Ancients Paladin, you'll gain Ensnaring Strike and Speak to Animals. Speaking with animals is perhaps one of the best social abilities in the game to have in any Larian game. I'm looking at you, pet pal.
I love you.
At level 5, these spells include Moonbeam and Misty Step. Both of these are fantastic spells. Moonbeam is a concentrated laser beam of death. Moonlight that will melt anything it touches. And each turn, you can move it. Just be careful if you start looting after combat, as you might end up melting yourself. And Misty Step is a bonus action teleport. Gets you to where you want to smack things, or you could use it to escape, I suppose. Oath of the Ancients, especially with their new level 1 Oath ability, becomes a really strong contender to consider in Baldur's Gate 3. On to the Oath of Devotion, the quintessential or classic lawful good paladin. Honesty, courage, duty, honor, and compassion. Protect the weak, never lie or steal, be like Superman. Oath of Devotion's level 1 ability is a little bit lackluster, but perhaps I just didn't find the right ways to increase its potential. Maybe it'll get buffed on launch. I'll have to get back to you on that. But it is called Holy Rebuke, which lasts for 2 turns and that can be cast on an ally. However, you can't cast it on yourself, which will deal 1d4 radiant damage to anyone that hits them with a melee attack. And it doesn't scale yet, as far as I can tell. But like I said, I haven't been able to really play with it too much yet. We'll see how it is on launch. Level 3 will give us our Channel Oath abilities, Sacred Weapon, which lets you imbue your weapon to add your Charisma modifier to attack rolls, which will increase your chance to hit. A really solid option to help connect your melee attacks that deliver more smites, as well as Turn the Unholy, which will turn undead and also fiends. Your level 7th aura makes you and your allies immune to charm within your aura. It's pretty neat, but it may not be worth a level. The spell list for this subclass is okay, nothing too crazy, but you aren't really getting anything amazing out of these spells. And a lot of the spells you already have access to. Level 3 will give you access to protection from Evil and Good and Sanctuary, which is a neat defensive trick. Level 5 will give us Lesser Restoration and Zone of Truth, which is neat for social situations. I'm not sure if it's going to be included in the game. It probably is. Overall, the Devotion Paladin is just okay. Their Sacred Weapon Channel Oath ability is one of the only redeeming factors for me, and their spell list isn't all too impressive. Which could also be a good thing, as it just means you have more spell slots to smite with. And next, we'll move on to the fan favorite oath, the Oath of Vengeance, whose oath embodies the anime protagonist. You must fight the greater evil, granting no mercy to the wicked. You must defeat evil by any means necessary. Doubt must not get in the way of exterminating the enemy. If the world suffers, it's because you haven't smited evildoers enough. I don't know what Vengeance level 1 oath feature is, but I'm excited to see it. Hopefully it's pretty good. Our other 2 channel oath abilities level 3 are pretty solid. Abjure Enemy will make an enemy frightened, unless it's immune, for up to 10 rounds, if it doesn't take damage. Fiends and Undead have disadvantage on the save. Vow of Enmity will let you gain advantage on an enemy for 10 rounds, or if it drops to 0 hit points, or falls unconscious. This is the anime protagonist boss killing ability. Just make sure you make a cliche anime speech when you cast this spell. Level 7's Aura isn't too crazy for this build to consider, but it gives you free movement after you make an attack of opportunity. Solid for polearm masters. We'll probably dabble in this when we get to our Vengeance Paladin build, which will be coming down the road. And their spell list is pretty solid too. At level 3 you get Bane and Hunter's Mark, which lets you do extra damage. It will stack up once you get your extra attacks. And level 5 will grant you Hold Person and Misty Step. These are both fantastic options as well, especially once we get our levels of Sorcerer and we can cast Hold Person as a bonus action. More on that later. And for all you naughty boys and girls and everything in between, we have the Oathbreaker, who are paladins that break their oath, either due to maliciousness, tired of its teachings, felt like they made the right choice, or in most situations, on accident.
Be free, innocent creature. Ah, shit.
But fear not. Just because you broke your oath doesn't mean you're now evil and must be a psychopath murdering everybody. If anything, it liberates you in terms of RP, as you aren't bound by your oaths when choosing dialogue options. And you can certainly use these new powers for evil, but you could also use them for good as well.
These powers can be used for good or ill.
Its level 1 Channel Oath ability is pretty awesome, if it succeeds. Spiteful Suffering, which will do a bit of damage as you apply it, and will do some damage on the following turns. But it also grants advantage to all attack rolls against it, essentially giving everyone in your party Vow of Enmity from the Vengeance Paladin. At level 3, you get 2 more sweet Channel Oath abilities that are pretty solid. Control Undead, which will let you attempt to bind an undead creature to your will until you have a long rest, as long as they're lower level than you, which can make for some sweet combos later, such as controlling a white and having that white create a zombie army for you. Hopefully we can achieve that dream in Baldur's Gate 3. And then the other Channeled Oath is Dreadful Aspect, which is an AoE fear which can come in pretty clutch sometimes. Level 7's Aura is Aura of Hate, which increases your damage and any fiends or undead near you by your Charisma modifier, whether they're allied or not. Their spell list is okay, with Hellish Rebuke and Inflict Wounds at level 3, and at level 5 you get Crown of Magnus and the Darkness spells. I am personally a huge fan of the Oathbreaker from an RP and flavor perspective. It's a lot more freeing to be able to do and say whatever you want, and I'm also a big fan of them mechanically, especially if you plan to combo with somebody playing the Spore Druid or a Necromancer, to have undead allies benefit from your aura. However, they're probably not the best choice for the Sorcadin, but you can always redeem yourself to return to your previous oath. And you could always break it again and keep going back and forth, as long as you have the funds. Now we'll move on to the Sorcerer, who are gifted spellcasters that receive their powers at birth, as it courses through their veins, manifesting at some point in your life. No one chooses sorcery, the power chooses the sorcerer. Except in D&D or Baldur's Gate 3, where we literally get these powers by choosing the class. But hey, semantics. At level 1, the Sorcerer will provide you 1d6 plus con modifier to HP at level 1, and 4 plus con for each level thereafter. Meaning you will have, with the 14 Constitution, you'll have 8 hit points at level 1, and gain 6 on each level. We gain no armor proficiencies, and we can only use staves, daggers, slings, and light crossbows. For saving throws, we have Charisma as well, just like the Paladin. But we also have access to Constitution saving throws, which are very important for spellcasters. Since anytime we're concentrating on a spell and take damage, we must make a Constitution saving throw or else we lose concentration, and thus the spell. Like Snape in Harry Potter. Oh, it also helps us against things like poisons or eating bad food. We also gain access to arcane spells, and we choose these spells, and we can choose what spells we want every level. But we can't change them or learn new ones unless we level up. Which does matter, because some spells are better in lower levels such as Sleep, and it loses its effectiveness as you fight stronger foes. We also choose our lineage here, which will grant us features at level 1 and level 6. The Draconic Bloodline, Wild Magic, and Storm Sorcery. The Dragon Sorcerer gained their innate magic by being blessed by some type of dragon at some point in their ancestry, or somebody in your family tree had a little too much fun with a dragon. At level 1, you gain Draconic Resilience, which will increase your HP by 1 per level, and increase your armor class by 13 plus your dexterity modifier while not wearing armor, which can make for a completely different build, and you can be a dex-based Sorcadin that starts as a sorcerer, but we'll get more on that later in the video. You also choose what type of dragon we hail from between chromatic and metallic flights. Each have their own lore and temperaments and benefits, and each also have an associated element with it. In addition, Larian added a free spell for each flight. Some standouts for me are red, black, white, and copper. At level 6, we will also increase the damage of our spells and gain resistance to that same element that is associated with our flight. So for example, if you chose the red dragon, you will gain bonus damage to fire and you become resistant to it as well, without spending sorcery points like you do on tabletop. The Wild Magic Sorcerer is one of my personal favorites. They gain their magic by being connected to the Feywild or another supernatural plane. And as the chaotic magical energy churns within you, this causes your spells to sometimes be an outlet for that energy, in the way of Wild Magic Surging. Whenever you cast a spell level 1 or higher, you have a chance to unleash that surge, causing a random effect to happen. This could be from anything, from teleporting with your opponents, causing your next melee attack to deal some extra damage, or, exploding. Baldur's Gate 3's Wild Magic list is a bit different than how we know it on tabletop, but we'll have to wait for the full game to see all effects that'll be included. We also get Tides of Chaos, which will grant us advantage on the next attack, ability check, or saving throw we make. However, we must wait until a long rest to use it again, but using it will also increase our chance for a Wild Magic Surge to occur on your next spell. In 5th edition, Tides of Chaos is also supposed to refresh when a Wild Magic Surge occurs, but in early access, this isn't the case. Hopefully this will be fixed upon launch. At level 6, we gain Bend Luck, which lets us use some sorcery points as a reaction to mess with somebody else's roll, whether to help them or to hurt them. Your choice. Wild Magic is a lot of fun, as I mentioned before, if you like a little bit of chaos and randomness, but this could also be a bad thing, as the unreliability can be frustrating. And so far, most of the random effects I've seen are really beneficial for our Gish character. And lastly, we have the Storm Sorcery. Somehow you've been infused with elemental air magic, basically turning you into Storm from X-Men. At level 1, we'll be gaining Tempestuous Magic, which will let you fly as a bonus action whenever we cast a level 1 spell or higher, and you won't trigger attack of opportunity while you're using this flight. And depending on how it's implemented in Baldur's Gate 3, this could be very sweet, especially for a melee character. But even if it's only a little bit of flight, with all the verticality in this game, flying is always nice. At level 6, you gain Heart of the Storm, which will grant you resistance to lightning and thunder damage. And whenever you cast a lightning or thunder spell, it causes you to erupt with energy that deals additional damage equal to half of your sorcerer level of the associated element. Pretty neat. It's a decent subclass for sure, and the flight can be useful for our character. But I think this sorcerer is better suited for different multi-class options, such as the Tempest Cleric. But that is for another video. At level 2, you begin to acquire sorcery points, which will allow you to convert sorcery points into spell slots, or vice versa. But the main reason you care about these points is for our next feature, at level 3, the sorcerer's other defining feature, Meta Magic, which will let you choose between several powerful options that let you alter a spell in various ways, such as making a full action spell be castable as a bonus action, shooting a single target spell at 2 targets, or changing the spell's damage type completely, which is super beneficial to the Dragon Sorcerer, and even more so for the Tempest multiclass, as I mentioned earlier. But again, that's for another video. Meta Magic standouts for this build to me are Quicken, Twinned, and Subtle. There are other good options to consider as well, and we'll get into that during the leveling portion of this guide as well. At level 4, we get an ASI or Feat, but we can also swap it out for a cantrip or Meta Magic feature with a different one. And at level 5, if it's implemented, will allow us to use a sorcery point to reroll an ability check at least once. Obviously, higher sorcerer levels will result in higher level spells and more spell slots. Sorcerer is a pretty sweet magic user, even though their spell choices are limited, since unlike the wizard, they are more or less stuck with the spell choices they've picked. However, the ability to alter your spells, such as cast times and even the element itself, really lends itself to the Sorcadin. for a little unique flavor of magic compared to the wizard, yet again. Especially when casting a full action spell as a bonus action and following it up with smacking an enemy upside the head. Twice. We'll now get into which races pair well with Sorcadin. But I wanted to caveat with this and let you know that you should pick the race you prefer and like the most. There is no absolute correct answer, because each race can be useful in some way or another. And in Baldur's Gate 3, there are many items that are race restricted, which could lend itself even further with the Sorcadin. We don't know till we see them all. But without knowing any of the items, here are some recommendations for both power and flavor for this Paladin Sorcerer multiclass. Starting with the Dragon board, which makes an obvious sense to be a wild magic I'm just kidding, you know I was going to say Draconic Bloodline, which goes hand in hand with it. But some of the racial bonuses overlap with what the Bloodline will provide you. You also get a breath attack associated with your Dragonflight color, and unfortunately, Baldur's Gate 3 is using the Player's Handbook rule of 1 use per long rest, as opposed to Fizz Bands, which lets you use it based on your proficiency bonus. That being said, if you want to be a Dragonborn made out of dragons, you do that. Not to mention they make pretty solid paladins too. So don't worry about the overlapping features, just be a cool badass dragon. Why not? Or any elf or half-elf makes solid choices, particularly the high elf variants since you can get another free cantrip. However, they'll be intellect based, so make sure you use a utility one instead of a damaging cantrip. Then half-elves are always nice because they get you extra stat bonuses. Tieflings and half-orcs make solid choices too, since they typically make solid paladins. The Sorcadin is a Gish-type character, which is a term that refers to a character that excels in both martial and magical prowess, meaning that they hit well in both melee and spells. But the term was originally a title for a type of Githyanki who did just that, and it would be a crime not to include the Githyanki on this list. I also really like the idea of a red dragon Githyanki sorcerer whose ancestor got a little frisky with their red dragon allies. They offer some sweet racial bonuses in armor and weapon proficiencies, which could also allow you to start as a sorcerer instead of a paladin, much like the dragon sorcerer. But I do want to caveat this by saying that it's difficult to play a Githyanki paladin, at least for following the Oath of Ancients or Devotion, since Githyanki culture is very brutal, and they don't really care for the weak, and they also respect things like slavery. None of the available oaths on launch will really fit for the Githyanki, at least until Oath of Conquest become available, which is one of my pipe dreams, but until that day comes, Oath of Vengeance, or simply being an Oathbreaker, may be passable. For stats, typically we want 3. High Charisma, Constitution, and Strength. Charisma will allow us to cast better spells, and increase the effect of many other features that we have. We will be in melee, meaning we'll be getting hit often. High Constitution means higher health, and we'll be concentrating on spells pretty often too. And a high Constitution will lend itself by helping us with our concentration saves. And we'd also want good strength so we can smack our enemies with our weapon to deliver smites. Not to mention that there are strength requirements to wearing heavy armor. A balanced stat line could be 16 strength, 10 dexterity, 14 constitution, 8 intellect, 10 wisdom, and 17 charisma after racial bonuses. And if you're playing a dex-based Sorcadin, then you can swap out strength and dexterity. And if you have the option to have a 10 in intellect or wisdom, it's up to you on which one you want to be even, since both have nasty CC spells associated with them. However, I think wisdom is the better choice because there's a lot more mind spells, at least in my experience. But again, the choice is yours. Now on to the basics of the build. We're going to be using a mixture of slinging spells and swinging our weapon, either with a two-hander or a one-handed weapon and shield. Typically, we'll be shooting out spells with our quick and meta magic as a bonus action, and then smacking fools with our big-ass weapon. Not sure if Booming Blade or other attack cantrips will be in, but once we hit higher levels, we won't miss it too much. Did I mention that we're going to be smacking fools with our weapon? Well, don't forget, we picked Paladin, so we could smite the hell out of anything that's in our way. That's the main reason why we picked this build, so we can have extra spell slots to smite if we're not actually using those spell slots. Typically, if we do actually want to cast spells, we want a mix of blasting, crowd control, defensive, or self-buff spells. I'll go over which spells specifically we want to look for in the leveling guide. The other nuanced portion of this build is determining how many levels you want of each class. There are many debates on which is the most optimal path. Do we go 6 levels of Paladin for your Aura, 7 for the Oath Aura? Some builds even just use 2 levels of Paladin, so that they have access to higher level sorcerer spells. You can go all day discussing the pros and cons of each. Ultimately, at the end of the day, play what you think is thematic and what feels right to you. Because D&D is all about choice. There is no wrong right? There is no right or wrong way to play, especially since this is designed to be a single player game, even though you can play with friends. Alright, so that was a lot to talk about, because there are so many options you can choose. Pick what you like for your theme or flavor. Not every character has to be the most powerful. That being said, we'll get into our leveling guides, and we'll actually be showcasing two different builds here, since there are so many options. The first build we'll build is a strength-focused one that will be a 6-6-6 split, and will start as a Sage background half-elf of the High Elf variety, picking your favorite cantrip as a level 1 Oath of Ancients Paladin, grabbing Persuasion and Athletics as our skills. At level 2, we can either grab the Great Weapon Fighting or Duelist fighting styles, and fight with a shield. Since this is a strength-based build, we'll just go ahead and use that big beefy two-hander. Though Sword and Board is always a great option. Pick what you like. For spells, we'll be picking up Bless, Thunderous Smite, Cure Wounds, and you can always swap out these choices when you long rest as a paladin since they are prepared casters. At level 3, we'll gain our Channel Oath abilities. We can also gain another spell. This time I picked up Shield of Faith. At level 4, we can grab an ASI or feat. There are tons of great feat options for us to pick from, but without a doubt the first one we should always grab is Warcaster, which will do a ton for us. It gives us advantage on our concentration checks. It'll allow us to cast a spell even with our hands full, although I'm not sure if this is an issue in Baldur's Gate 3. And whenever we make an opportunity attack, we can replace it with a spell. I'm really excited to see if this works in Baldur's Gate 3 like it does in Tabletop. If it does, that's going to be awesome. At level 5, we'll get our extra attack and we'll choose our level 2 Paladin spells. We'll grab Lesser Restoration and hopefully find Steed here, if it's in the launch. Otherwise, you can just pick whatever you want. At level 6, we'll wrap up our Paladin levels, unless you want to get that Ancient Zara, which might be viable if not to help protect your allies from enemies, but from your own wild magic outbursts. Oh, that's right, I didn't mention. In this build, we're doing wild magic sorcery. And at level 7, we'll begin our plunge into Sorcerer. We can begin this journey at level 3, but for simplicity's sake, we'll just keep it here at level 7. We'll pick up the Wild Magic Sorcerer with your favorite blasting or utility cantrips, and pick up Thunder Wave and Shield. Or pick up utility spells like Jump and Featherfall. At level 8, we will grab our second level of Sorcerer, gaining our Sorcerer points, and you can also grab another level 1 spell, such as Absorb Elements, or utility spell. At level 9, we'll get our Meta Magic and grab Quicken and whatever Meta Magic you'd like. And for level 2 spells, we'll pick up Web and a Blasting spell. At level 10, we get our first ASI. Level 10, we'll get our next ASI/feat. We can choose to bump our stats here, but there are also some great combat feat options as well, such as Great Weapon Master or Polearm Master. But with Tides of Chaos being a reliable way to get advantage, let's do Great Weapon Master here. At level 11, we'll pick 5th level Sorcerer, and we'll finally be getting access to our level 3 Sorcerer spells. Counterspell is always an auto-include, in my opinion. Fly is pretty great too, especially being a melee character to get you around everywhere. But there are some pretty sweet blasting options in crowd control, or even buff spells here too. I like to pick Vampiric Touch for self-heals, or the notorious Fireball. But 3rd level blasting spells might not be the best option this late into the game. And at level 12, we'll wrap up the build with the final point in Sorcerer, getting our 6th level feature, which isn't all too crazy, so you can decide to pick 7 levels of Paladin, like I suggested earlier, if you prefer to pick up that Resistance Aura. I really enjoy this build for flavor, as you're a defender of the Feywilds, and in turn, it will grant you incredible magic abilities beyond even your control, which can lead to some fun or funny endeavors. Typical pre-combat phase would be buff yourself with Bless or another buff, and when combat begins, your turns will usually be to launch a Quicken spell, such as Hold Person or a Blast spell, and then attacking them with your Greatsword, striking twice and hopefully smiting them, and dealing with whatever wild magic shenanigans that have been bestowed upon you. Hopefully it's a good thing. I hope. A thing to note though is if you do quick cast Hold Person and you succeed, your attacks will generally automatically crit. Pretty sure. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's right. We'll pick up a White Dragon Sorcerer Githyanki with the Soldier background. Thematically, I'd pick red, but I think white is superior only because it gets access to Armor of Agathis. But again, Red Dragon Githyanki, you're still in my heart. And because we are starting with the Dragon Sorcerer, we have that pretty sweet natural armor passive. Because of that, we'll be focusing on dexterity here. Our stats will be 8 strength, 16 dexterity, 15 constitution, 8 intelligence, 8 wisdom, and 17 charisma. Unless we can actually boost 3 stats by 1 instead of doing the 2 and 1, then we'll do 16 dex, 16 con, and 16 charisma. because there's not really having a point of 17 Charisma unless you're going to be able to boost it to 18 pretty quickly, and we're not going to be boosting our ASI for quite some time. Choosing Thunderwave and Shield, as well as Ray of Frost and Shocking Grasps eventually. We can also wield a short sword to attack, if we desire. At level 2, we will pick up our first level of Paladin, choosing any of the oaths here. We'll probably go with Vengeance, as it will suit a Githyanki a little bit more. But honestly, if we become an Oathbreaker, that's fine too. We're not going heavy into Paladin this type around. And we can also now wield a shield and a rapier, instead of that short sword. At level 3, we'll pick up Paladin level 2, grabbing the dueling fighting style, Cure Wounds, Bless, Thunderous, or Wrathful Smite. At level 4, we'll swap back to Sorcerer and finish out as a Sorcerer from here on out. And just make sure to grab Warcaster, and maybe another ASI. And that's the build! Like, comment, and subscribe for more. Alright, I'm just kidding again. But honestly, you can spend a lot of time trying to weigh and balance the right combination of Paladin and Sorcerer for any of these builds. For the Dragon-based Sorcadin, I'd suggest running at least 8 levels of Sorcerer to get that second ASI or feed option, and you could finish off with Paladin 4 for the other. Or you can grab another Sorcerer level for 5th level spells. But you can now see what I mean, that there are so many choices for the build. Ultimately, play what you think is cool and fits together, especially once we finally see all the items available to us. I really hope you like this guide. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. Or maybe you'd like to tell me how wrong I am in the comments and how you like to play your Sorcadin. Or maybe you pronounce it Sorcadin, like a weirdo. I'm looking to push out at least 2 to 3 more guides before launch comes out. So if you have a build you'd like me to do before launch, please let me know in the comments below. Eventually I'll have all kinds of builds for you to watch and consider. Thanks again, and I hope to see you in the next one. Farewell for now.